This meeting is now being recorded.
Okay. So the first thing that we are going to do is I would love to know who is on the call with us today and your familiarity with the side-by-side document. So the first thing we're going to ask you is which agency you are with and what your role is. So if you could go ahead and answer that. Okay, and you should see who we have on the call here. We're still getting responses. And for those of you, if you're joining the call and you're getting kicked off, I would recommend hanging up and closing out of your computer and rebooting, and then try to sign on again. We have a lot of participants on the call today, so it may be that it's struggling a little bit with capacity. But Christy Phillips, if Pueblo can't get on, like I said, it is going to be recorded, and we're also going to present it again tomorrow, so don't despair. So it looks like we have a nice mix of child find coordinators, child find team members, CCB representatives. So great. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. Okay, and then the second question that we have for you this morning is the familiarity with the CCB-AU side-by-side. So if you could go ahead and share with us if you've had a chance to review it. Looks like many folks have had the opportunity to look at it briefly. And I'm glad to see that some folks have read it and have begun discussions with their agency counterparts. That is great, and that is really the intent of this side-by-side, that you have the opportunity to meet and discuss it and make changes that you may need in your MOUs as a result of the side-by-side or as a reference. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. And I am going to turn it over to Heidi.
Thanks, Juanita. So let's just briefly review the outcomes that we intend for the call today, as well as outcomes for the release of these documents and their availability for you to use at the local level. First, we hope to provide clarity on the roles and responsibility of each agency partner. Second, we'll be using the documents to inform the interagency collaboration that you all have, and for the development of your interagency agreements. We think that these tools will be useful in the work that you're doing there. Third, we'd like to give you all an opportunity to ask questions as a way to become familiar with the side-by-side document and to engage with the information. And lastly, through the release of the PowerPoint resource and the webinar call, we would like this to be an ongoing reference tool for folks. I also want to just re-articulate what was said in the memo that accompanied these documents, which is that these replace the documents that were released in 2007, which I know many of you have utilized as reference documents over these last number of years. And so these documents, this document and the memo replace those 4 documents that were released at that time. And the purpose really is to clearly articulate which agency is responsible for the particular activities, as we mentioned, and to also designate when the other agency is permitted to carry those responsibilities out. Again, this is effective immediately. So we do expect that some of this information, as you're going through it, might uncover or expose local instances where an agency not responsible for a particular agency or activity, rather, is conducting it. And we want to just assure you that we understand that it will take some time for you to have these conversations, and we want you to engage with us if you're experiencing challenges with the information or want some support in walking through your own process as it relates to information you're learning through the use of these tools. Relative to interagency collaboration, it's critical, as you know, for both agencies that have some responsibility for these activities to work together and collaboratively to implement these requirements. And in order for that to be an effective collaboration, both agencies need to understand what their role is, what they're accountable for, and what the other agency is accountable for. One of the kind of primary points that we need to make is that the accountable agency is responsible, whether or not they're the entity performing that activity. So it's really important as you're looking at particular activities, if the permitted agency is carrying out something on behalf of the accountable or responsible agency, that you have clear agreements, written agreements about that, and that you document how you're fulfilling requirements in those local agreements. But we recognize that lots of these agreements are determined at the local level. So how one community agrees to and handles something may be slightly different than how that same requirement is being met in another place. As I mentioned a moment ago, if an agency performs an activity that the other agency is responsible for, you really want to make sure that you are completing all of the required components of that activity, and the accountable agency is the agency that ultimately is responsible for that. Just a note, too, about making sure that our collaborative efforts result in smooth and efficient processes, making the best use of each agency's limited resources. We know that resources and capacity is limited on both sides of our system. And so the purpose of that collaboration is really to identify and address gaps, but also to reduce or eliminate duplication of effort. And then lastly, as is mentioned in the introduction of the side-by-side, we really expect an annual review of these written agreements that folks have to articulate what their local systems look like and how they're going to carry out local requirements.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Okay, so hopefully you have the side-by-side document in front of you, and we're really going to go through it pretty systematically by section. So the first section is public awareness, and the primary responsibility for public awareness rests with early intervention. And although coordination is required and local agreements define the roles and activities for outreach to the public and primary referral sources, effective PA activities are going to include building ongoing relationships with those primary referral sources. So, visiting with the pediatricians in your community, having clear referral processes in place, and educating those in your community that are your primary referral sources about how to access early intervention, the 1-800 number, what types of children are eligible for our services, and what our program does, what our model looks like, accessing and providing those brochures that are available to you, and really establishing the relationships with the primary referral sources. Sometimes activities in the community are going to include screening events where families are encouraged to bring children to have them access a developmental screening. And we really want to stress that these events should not be intended for children for whom a concern is already established. It's really a mechanism to inform families about typical child development and information about whether their child is on track developmentally. And so if a community center board or an AU is involved in one of these community or universal screening activities for children where a concern has not been established, that's what we're calling a pre-referral screening. So events that are promoted to the public. And so for this type of activity, prior written notice, consent is not needed because that's considered pre-referral. So screening conducted by screening entities before a concern has been established through universal screening efforts. So that's going to include well child visits, home visiting programs, other community screening, all fall under that pre-referral screening. Once a concern has been identified, a referral needs to be made to the Part C early intervention system, and that's either to the community center board or the AU, and the 45-day timeline begins. Heidi, do you want to talk about these public awareness resources a little bit?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Juanita. These are some ideas about where you could go to learn more about what's available in the literature about effective public awareness strategies. The TRACE resources, that first link, those are resources that were developed under an OSEP-funded project, essentially. And a lot of those focus on methods for what's called tailored outreach. So it helps folks establish public awareness methods that are going to be most effective for each referral source. And I would just encourage you to take a look at those if you haven't already. They're available at the link there. The best resources, the resource listed there in the middle, benchmarks for early screening and testing, those are nice indicators for folks to review that look at really what are we looking to achieve with good screening and identification efforts. I think it helps folks with being able to review and evaluate whether your public awareness system is effective by considering those indicators that would that would be impacted with effective efforts. That was a project that was also supported by the Office of Special Education Programs, and the resources can be found at that link there. And then lastly, the Birth to 5 materials you may have seen recently. There are very new materials that were made available, I believe, in the late part of March. And this is a great example, actually, of some of what's suggested through the TRACE Center is the tailoring of materials for different system partners. So there you'll find things through that resource that were developed specifically for your primary referral sources or the primary partners in your public awareness efforts. So those include partners like early intervention providers, parents, primary care providers, child welfare folks, et cetera. So just encourage you to look at that information if you've not already. I think it would inform and encourage you about the work that you're already doing.
Okay, now we are going to go ahead and unmute your line so that we can take questions related to this first section, and between each section you're going to have an opportunity for questions. So we'll reserve it for this first section.
All guests have been muted. All guests have been unmuted.
Do we have any questions on this first section?
You're welcome to either chat your question or go ahead and just speak. Please identify yourself if you speak out loud.
Hi, this is Jessica Edelstein from Brighton, and I have just a quick clarification question that comes up for us frequently. And so if a parent is calling and has no developmental concerns about their child, but would still like them screened, are we obligated to make a Part C referral for that child if there is no developmental concern and it's just a, hey, I want to make sure everything's okay kind of screening?
So that would be an instance where it wouldn't necessarily be a referral to the Part C system, but it would be an appropriate place for them to get a pre-referral screening. So if you offer that within your community, that they could go ahead and participate in something like that. So really explaining to the family what early intervention is intended for, and talk about the fact that, you know, it's really to identify children that are suspected of having a developmental delay or disability.
I think sometimes, too, we've found that in some of those cases, through the intake process and conversations with the family at that point, it might rapidly change from, you know, just calling to make sure, you know, whether this is a resource we could consider or not, to a concern being expressed. And so at the point that call or that intake results in a concern being expressed, that's really the point at which the referral becomes a Part C referral.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. It helps.
I would say you need to talk to them.
Other questions? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to go ahead and mute your lines again. So if you still have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, now we're going to move on to referral, which we've been talking about a little bit here. So what constitutes a concern that should result in a referral? So if anyone has expressed a concern about the child's development, a referral can be made to either the CCB or the AU, and the child should be screened and or evaluated. And we just wanted to confirm that parental consent is not necessary to make a referral to early intervention to the Part C system. Obviously, it's best practice to inform the family that this referral is going to be made and include them from the very beginning. We also wanted to highlight that families can be referred to our system any day of the year, and that community center boards and AUs must make arrangements for the process to flow and staff accordingly. So that there's a plan for taking referrals and scheduling evaluations and required IFSP activities year-round. So the clock starts for the 45-day timeline on the day the referral is received by the child's agency of residence. So either the administrative unit or the community center board. Either the AU or the CCB can accept a referral, and each agency is responsible to notify the other of the receipt of a referral within 3 working days, so either direction. And the mode of referral could be in the form of a phone call, paper form, the referral form, the state referral form, fax, email. So, all those modes are acceptable. So we wanted to just make an example. Let's say a referral is made to the Community Center Board Developmental Pathways, and it really falls, the child's area of residence is North Metro. The timeline, the 45-day timeline, is going to start when North Metro receives the referral. And obviously we want to act on the referral immediately and quickly, but we just wanted to make that point of clarification of when the 45-day timeline starts. Okay, now we want to talk a little bit about late referrals to Part C. So if a child is referred to the Community Center Board within 45 days of his or her 3rd birthday, the CCB should send the referral directly to the administrative unit with the consent of the parent for Part C evaluation. Or you can give the parent the contact information for their AU of residence so the family can call directly. If the referral is received by the administrative unit, there is no need to send it to the Community Center Board because they're not responsible to conduct Part C activities for these late referrals.
So we'll go ahead and move on now and talk about post-referral screening. As I think you all know, this is something that was clarified in the fall 2011 changes to the Part C regulations. So just a review, post-referral screening activities are optional. So they were optional at the state level, and the state chose to put a policy in place that allows local communities to determine when they will conduct post-referral screening efforts. When communities choose to do post-referral screening, all of the requirements that were delineated there in those new regulations must be performed. So again, a reminder that the purpose of screening is to determine which children need further evaluation. So when a referral is received and there's not clarity about whether the child needs to go on to an evaluation, that's a good case to consider the use of post-referral screening efforts. Again, post-referral screening occurs after a child's been referred to early intervention. We still get a number of inquiries about what constitutes pre-referral or post-referral screening. So just want to try to clarify again that when you're doing screening after the referral's been made, those are post-referral screening activities, and those must meet the requirements. In terms of your local agreements, at the community level about whether or when you'll be using post-referral screening, we suggest that even if you have kind of a standing agreement that you don't typically do post-referral screening, you might want to also consider having kind of a hard and fast policy where you never consider conducting post-referral screening, because I think you might want to consider it in certain situations on a case-by-case basis, perhaps, or for certain populations for whom, for example, the CAPTA referrals. We hear often that the percentage of children that qualify after going through an evaluation process is quite small. So again, if there's not a lot of clarity about whether an evaluation is warranted, the use of post-referral screening can be quite helpful. Also want to just make the point here that the more pre-referral screening that happens, the less there would be a need for post-referral screening. We don't in any way want to duplicate screening efforts that are happening prior to referral occurring. Those screening results, whether they're done before or after the referral, really need to help inform and guide next steps and answer the question about whether further evaluation is needed. But we don't want to do pre-referral screening and post-referral screening unless there's a really valid reason for doing that. That would be considered essentially a duplication of effort and resources. Moving on around post-referral screening. In the conversations and communications that we've had with communities over these months since the time of this change, we wanted to just share some kind of common tips or answers to questions that we get pretty regularly. So this list, encompasses those things, some reminders. Use a standardized tool when you're doing post-referral screening and make sure that you're using trained screeners. Make sure that screening results are provided within a reasonable time. There's not a specific time defined in the regulations, but we think that you all will be able to determine what's reasonable based on that circumstance. If a pre-referral screening has been done, as we said, use that information rather than redo it. Make sure that you're getting consent for screening activities separate from consent for evaluation activities. Really don't want to see, nor would it be appropriate to see, a consent form that includes both consent for screening and for evaluation activities kind of as a measure of covering your bases should you need to go to evaluation. Those are separate processes and decisions. Screening should be conducted in person. We know that sometimes the screening tool may be completed by parents outside of your, face-to-face contact with a professional. However, the results should be scored, and the conversation about the results that all needs to be done in person with the family. And then lastly, we would want you to use screening results along with other information that you've gathered to inform your next steps. So it's really important to use what you know about that family so far and about the child in making decisions about, is that a valid representation of the child's skills and development? Is it a valid interpretation of the screening tool? Those are some of the things that I think you'll want to be considering as you identify what your next steps will be. So I think we'll go ahead and pause again and open it up for questions related to referral and post-referral screening at this point.
Okay, so we do have a question in the chat. Is funding reassigned if a permitted agency is doing the work identified as belonging to a responsible agency? And from a state perspective, that answer would be no. It's up to you within your community to determine who's willing to take on those activities, and that is a consideration with capacity and funding being limited, and that's one of the reasons that we are drawing your attention to some of these items in the side-by-side today, so that it is very clear what is an activity that your agency is responsible for, and what is an activity that's permissible based on what makes sense in your community. So there isn't a reassignment of funding.
And I will just add to that, we don't reassign the funds at a state level if you have these local agreements. It is permissible and certainly reasonable to negotiate contracts. You know, if at a local level you have an agreement about how something will be performed, it's, I think, often the case that an agency wouldn't take on something that they're not responsible for without the resources to do that. So you're certainly permitted to have those kinds of local agreements with, contracts that allow for you all to negotiate that at a local level.
Just a couple other clarifications. I apologize. Some of our review is a little out of order from the side-by-side, and we will be reviewing the initial service coordination functions section. So thank you for highlighting that. And then as far as this document that outlines these activities, they are on the EI Colorado website and will be on the CDE website as well. And that is under the training tab. And then if you go to monthly technical assistance calls, you will see the April CCB/AU-TA call, and the side-by-side is located there. Many of you should have received it as an email with the notice of this call, so I would check your email as well. So we're going to go ahead and unmute you and take questions on this section.
All guests have been unmuted.
Questions related to this section for post-referral screening? Referral?
Lenita?
Uh-huh.
Hey, it's Roanna.
Hi, Roanna.
Hi. Vicki and I are sitting here. Could you go back just really quickly and clarify for us when you were talking about if a CCB gets a referral but it's the wrong county?
Yes.
And the 45-day timeline. Just say what you said one more time, please.
So if, let's say, DDRC receives a referral for a child whose residence is actually in Arapahoe County, so developmental pathways, the 45-day timeline starts when the community center board receives that the child of residence, where that child lives, receives that referral.
Gotcha. So it wouldn't, not when DDRC takes it, but when the correct CCB takes it.
Correct.
Okay.
Because
thank
DP doesn't have any control over when DDRC says
right.
that.
Okay,
so
I just wanted to make sure I heard you because I thought I misunderstood that it started, and I was like, what? Thank you.
It starts when the CCB or AU of residence receives that referral.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Lenita?
Yes?
I have another question. This is Mickey.
Hi, Mickey.
With post-referral screening, has the 45th day timeline started because the referral has taken place?
Yes. The timeline with post-referral screening, yes. The timeline has started.
Okay.
The timeline starts when the referral is received by the Part C system. So by definition, the fact that the post-referral screening occurs after the Part C system receives the referral, that means that you're within the 45-day time frame.
With eating up some of those 45 days if you do a screening after referral.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's why it's really critical that these two systems work very closely together and have a very coordinated system so that you're receiving this information quickly, getting it to the folks that need it so that we can be respectful of each other's requirements for the time.
Lanita?
Excuse me, Lanita?
Yes, go ahead.
We're having kind of a little bit of trouble hearing you. So when other people talk, we can hear them really well, but when you talk, it gets really soft.
Okay, I will try to speak louder. Is that better?
That is better.
Okay, part of it is, for some reason, this headset. So I'll try to speak as loudly as I can.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Lanita?
Yes.
This is Lisa.
Hi.
We could use a little bit of clarification on specific circumstances where we get what I thought was referrals from different hospitals, and they're not necessarily a NICU referral where it's categorically eligible. A couple of our areas get referrals from local hospitals that say check up on them in 3 months, and they give all the information on a referral, and it says, it goes to Child Find, and it says, do check up on them in 2 or 3 months. I've been considering those as actual referrals because they came in as a referral. What's your take on that?
That would be my take as well.
Okay.
Other folks on the EI team have opinions about that?
You want our feedback on that?
No, from the state team.
Oh, gotcha.
Hi, Lanita. It's Christy.
Hi.
I think this is a circumstance where, again, the conversation has to occur as to, is there a concern about the child's development? They don't have an established condition. So you certainly can have a tickler system in place to follow up on the kids, but you're not gonna if the child, because you were saying it was a child in the NICU, correct?
And sometimes it's in the NICU, sometimes it's not. We just get these referrals from the hospitals when a baby, I don't know, I think they have a concern or they wouldn't be sending it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought you said the child was in the NICU.
But so the point is, they're saying, look at them in 3 months.
Right.
I think some of it, this is Heidi, you'll want to know as much as you can about the purpose or the reason for that referral. What were the circumstances that caused that health professional to determine that someone should be following this child's development? There may have been risk factors or developmental concerns, early on, or they might not have made the referral. So teasing that out to the extent that you can, I think will help you with that. That might be an instance where, again, screening is an appropriate next step because you're not sure that an evaluation is warranted.
Right. They're asking us to screen them at a later date, and I usually note something on there that they're premature or their APGARs were low or something like that. So to me, that constitutes a concern, which would make it a valid referral, and they just sit impending until we check up on them. And we're okay with that, but a couple of the child finds are thinking that those aren't referrals, and my question is, I'm considering them, yes, they're referrals, so we need to have that information. They need to go into the system. So I just wanted clarification on that.
Well, and I think, Lisa, this is Lenita, that, a conversation with the referral source about the confusion related to this and what constitutes a referral, and, talk to them about when I received this from you, I need to treat it as a referral if there's a concern, and when you note follow up in 3 months, that creates confusion. So, I think having that upfront conversation would be helpful.
And also talking with that referral source about community options for pre-referral screening. it might be very appropriate for the physician, for example, to do pre-referral screening in well baby visits following that discharge, or maybe you have other screening entities in your community that do pre-referral screening, and those may be an appropriate point for the family to access more information about an ongoing, developmental surveillance, essentially, for their little one prior to making a referral. But I think, Lisa, that this requires judgment, and it requires, professional decision-making. And so you have to, use the available information and, as Lenita said, talk with the folks in your system as well as the referral sources to kind of get a plan together about how to respond to some of these situations that aren't clear-cut.
I agree, and this is Christy again. I think what you have to remember at the end of the day is if it's determined that this is a referral, you need to contact the family. And then it's going to be the conversation with the family. You need to move forward with whatever activities are appropriate for that child and family situation. That's my opinion, that even if the referral source is telling you wait for 3 months, you still need to move forward with the referral and contact the family and talk to them about that.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, other questions related to referral? Okay, we're going to go ahead and mute your lines.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, now we wanted to highlight initial service coordination functions and some of the areas that we've had a lot of questions about from some communities. So just to clarify that a service coordinator, after a referral is received, a service coordinator is assigned to a family by the CCB within 3 working days, and that service coordinator is responsible for contacting the family within 7 working days. That being said, specific service coordination activities may be conducted by the AU Child Find staff who have completed the approved early intervention state training. So that's going to be either the service coordination core training or the state procedural safeguards training. Both meet the criteria for this requirement. I just want to highlight that service coordination is a right of families, and so it's the Community Center Board's responsibility to ensure families have comprehensive, competent service coordination from the point of referral. So that responsibility rests with the Community Center Board. If an AU agrees to take on certain initial service coordination tasks, these activities should be agreed upon by the Community Center Board and the AU prior to conducting these activities. So these initial service coordination functions can be conducted by AU Child Find staff up until the point evaluation is completed. So really, one of the purposes of a service coordinator being assigned to the family is they're really the one that is developing that ongoing relationship and rapport and trust. So, but if it works within your community for the AU to perform some of these administrative tasks, so prior written notice, consent, in order to create a seamless process for your families and agency partners, the AU can be designated to do that. Okay. So we're going to open the line quickly for questions related to this piece.
All guests have been unmuted.
We have questions related to initial service coordination functions.
This is Mickey. Can you please clarify, I'm catching is within 3 days of referral. Does the same thing apply, and I would assume it does, for families that are referred and their child is in the NICU? Is there anything that's different about contacting the families within 3 days?
So in terms of contacting the family, it's within 7 days. So the service coordinator is assigned within 3 days, and the family is contacted within 7 days.
Sorry, I had the wrong number.
That's okay.
The same number applies regardless of whether the child is still in the hospital or still in the NICU, correct?
Yeah, so you're going to try to connect with the family, of course, via phone. We're not going to, go to the NICU.
Right.
But it's really to let them know that you're there. But it's when they return home from the NICU is when all of that is really going to kick into place for them. But you are going to want to contact them. Other questions related to this? Okay, we're going to go ahead and mute your phone.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, these next few slides cover the section on evaluation of the child and assessment of the child and the family. And just a quick reminder, the first few slides here that we're going to be discussing relate to instances where an evaluation is needed to determine eligibility. We'll address situations in which assessment is done for children with established conditions in a later section. So just a reminder here that CCB is responsible for prior written notice, gaining consent for the evaluation, performing the family assessment after eligibility. We'll spend some time talking about that, as well as documenting results, evaluation results in the IFSP. And then the AU is responsible for administering the child-level evaluation and assessment in conformity with all of the Part C requirements. And you'll see those listed with the check mark bullets there. So the things that are required for the Part C evaluation include performing the evaluation in the child's language, ensuring that there are a minimum of 2 appropriately qualified personnel, one of whom is qualified in the primary area of concern, that the evaluation is administered within 45 days from the date of referral, that you're looking at multiple sources of information, including the use of an appropriate instrument, gathering the child's history, reviewing medical and other records as appropriate. You're responsible for identifying the level of functioning in each developmental area, and then for sharing those methods, procedures used, and the results verbally with the family and the CCB representative. And then, of course, in the course of conducting that process, you're using informed clinical opinion. Wanted to address a few things that we've had questions about or input about. One being, we know that there are instances where the AU agrees to gain the parent's signature for evaluation, and that's being done after the CCB representative has provided the parent with procedural safeguards through a verbal conversation and has had that conversation with families, the written form with the parent's signature needs to be in the child's record, which is kept by the CCB. So if you have the CCB administering that information, through a verbal conversation, but the AU actually getting the written signature, you need to make sure that your local procedures discuss how the AU will know that the procedural safeguards were given ahead of them gaining the signature, and how the CCB will get the signed form and by when, so that you have clarity in your system about how each step of that process occurs. I also wanted to mention we've had a number of questions and some conversations with folks about the presence of the service coordinator in the evaluation. We want to clearly state that it is preferable for the service coordinator to be at the evaluation. However, it is not a requirement. We know that there are circumstances that occur that prevent service coordinators from being able to be present, and we don't want that to hold up the process of an evaluation and assessment. So if the service coordinator is not present at the evaluation, in that instance, the AU needs to provide a written summary or report with the evaluation and assessment results. We don't have a specific required time frame for that within the rules, but it really needs to be provided as soon as possible, typically within a few days. And when you have these instances occurring that might vary from your typical procedure, again, we suggest having written agreements outlining the process so that you know, and have agreed to in advance what are the situations where you're going to proceed without a service coordinator present. Again, we think it's preferable for them to be there, but it is not a requirement. And this next slide talks specifically about the 45-day timeline and communication and procedures around how to handle instances where an AU, for example, possibly due to capacity issues or resource challenges, may not be able to conduct the evaluation within the 45-day timeline. So we're not talking here about a family's preference to not have the evaluation within the 45-day timeline. We're talking about instances where system constraints are influencing whether the evaluation can be performed. If the AU cannot schedule the evaluation within the 45-day timeline, they need to notify the CCB as soon as possible that they don't have the capacity to do that, share the date that they would be able to do that. We want to emphasize here that, we typically would want to see that within about 2 days, the CCB is notified that the evaluation would be outside of the 45-day window, along with the first date that the evaluation could be scheduled. And then the CCB has an opportunity to determine if they have the capacity to conduct the evaluation within the 45-day timeline and choose to proceed to do that. That's their choice. They're permitted to do that. However, if the CCB cannot perform the evaluation within the timeline or chooses not to perform the evaluation, then they would let the AU know that, and the evaluation remains with the AU and would be conducted late. Again, just a brief note about family reasons versus system reasons related to the 45 days. When the system is unable to complete the evaluation due to agency constraints, that's a systems reason. If the family requests an elongated timeline for the evaluation or requests more time or has circumstances that prevent the evaluation from being conducted within the 45 days, but the system was capable of doing that, that is considered a family reason.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm going to turn it over to you. So.
Thank you, Heidi. So we have quite a few questions in the chat box, which we will address here in just a minute after we do this next section on family assessment. We'll respond to those and open up the phone lines. So this is highlighted for you, and we wanted to give you a little context about this decision. We spent a lot of time, as you know, working on this side by side and getting feedback. And when both state agencies went through this process, we really reviewed the federal language very carefully. And in reviewing that, we realized that the family assessment is clearly outlined in the regulations in 303.321 as only required for children found eligible. And that really changed our perspective a little bit about this piece. And so the family assessment piece should occur after a child is found eligible, and it may occur simultaneously with the evaluation, but really, if we're adhering to this piece of the regulations, we wouldn't be conducting that family assessment piece prior to eligibility being determined. So,
and certainly not prior to the evaluation.
Correct. So the state is really supporting family assessment for children found eligible, and our intent is not to make agencies change what they're doing, but to be thoughtful about when in the process this activity makes sense for families. Because it is an involved process, and when it's conducted after eligibility is established, it's more relevant for families, and it prevents the collection, hopefully, of redundant information from families. We shouldn't really be asking families for the same information over and over again. It should be a cohesive process, and we should build on the information that is already gathered as well. And really, we want to promote establishing a relationship between the family and the professionals that are going to be involved with the family throughout their time, hopefully in intervention. The other points we wanted to note is that any information that is collected by either agency is shared quickly, and that you have an effective process to do that so that it really informs all the activities and processes that rely on this information. We also want to underscore that the family assessment is voluntary on the part of the family, on each member that's participating, and that we need to make sure that we're conveying that to families, that this is a voluntary process. Personnel conducting the family assessment need to be trained in the use of the tool that's selected, that it is in a conversational interview format, and that it's conducted in the native language of the family. And we realize that for some communities this is going to be a change. For others, you may continue to conduct child evaluation and family assessment simultaneously. Others, you may need to get more family assessment information to do a good, thorough job with the IFSP development. But reach out if you need support thinking about how you can make this work in your community, and we are certainly willing to provide individualized technical assistance on this issue. So first, before we unmute your lines, we're going to go through some of the questions in the chat. So if the child evaluation team member who is designated as the qualified personnel in the area of concern, for example, the SLP, is sick on the day of the evaluation, does the evaluation need to be rescheduled?
Thanks for your question, Trish. That is a difficult situation. I would say that whether or not you reschedule the evaluation is a decision that you make as the administrator there, at that time. And to think of the evaluation as a process, it's a series, typically, of activities that often occur over a period of time. So there may be things that you could proceed with without that one person participation, that you would go back then at a later point and fill in that activity that perhaps could not happen with the person who is qualified in the primary area. You may prefer as a community to reschedule, but again, there may be particular methods or procedures and other qualified personnel that can proceed with aspects of your evaluation, and then you could go back and fill in. Or you may have an opportunity to have another professional stand in if they do have the qualification in the primary area of concern. I hope that helps. I know it's never ideal when you have a full schedule of evaluations and someone not available.
Okay, so the next question is, if a service coordinator is present, then is it necessary to have summary reports? So if the service coordinator is present and the IFSP team, the evaluators, the service coordinator, the family are all doing a good job contributing to the development of the IFSP document, that information should be sufficient to document the present levels of delay and all the information required for the IFSP. Then you would not need to do a separate summary report.
Yeah, and there is no requirement to do a separate written report. It is, a requirement for the AU to share information and results, as well as the methods and procedures used, as Lenita said, as a part of that process, and that information needs to be documented, as we said, in the IFSP at a minimum. So additional reports or, reports to augment the IFSP are certainly not required.
So then the next question, if it's not a requirement for the service coordinator to be present at the evaluation, how are the signatures obtained? Are the evaluation and the IFSP separate meetings? The service coordinator's role is still to facilitate the IFSP. So as we were talking about earlier, if within your community the CCB and the AU have agreed to let the AU take on certain service coordination functions and tasks, and they are trained, so they either go through the service coordination core training or the procedural safeguards training, they could issue prior written notice and obtain signatures for consent for the evaluation. So where that would stop would be at the determination of eligibility. The Community Center Board is responsible for that, and we'll go into that in more detail here in a few minutes. But the service coordination activities would end at determining eligibility.
And I would just add, Rochelle, I think we see this in some communities where there are great distances traveled by service coordinators and evaluators and families across a big expansive area. And so in some of those situations, we know that the agreements are that, for example, the procedural safeguards would be shared with the family verbally over the phone by the service coordinator, and the AU representative would simply be assuring that the family signed the form, that they understand their rights. So there's just a variety of circumstances out there, and in those cases it is typically multiple meetings that are occurring, and so the service coordinator then, of course, would be present at the eligibility determination meeting and the IFSP meeting.
Okay, so the next question is family assessment the same as a routines-based interview? So a routines-based interview is a type of family assessment. Okay, another question. Does it make more sense to complete a family assessment in collaboration with the child outcome summary? Joy, that's a wonderful question, and we're in the process of really looking at how we can integrate the child outcome summary process with the IFSP process. We have a work group, a state work group, and Heidi and I are both participating in that process. So you're ahead of the game a little bit there. Okay, we're going to go ahead and unmute your phone so that you can ask questions related to evaluation and assessment and family assessment piece as well.
All guests have been unmuted.
Hi, Lenita. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Laura. I just wanted to add one thing on to Joy's last question, and that is when you're thinking about when it makes the most sense to conduct the family assessment, it is important to remember that that information is really what allows you to develop functional outcomes and make the IFSP individualized. So you have to keep that in mind when you're thinking about when to conduct that in regards to determination of eligibility and development of the IFSP.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks.
Other questions related to this? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. Going to go ahead and mute your lines again.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, so hopefully this is a bit of a review for folks. So this is addressing multidisciplinary assessment for children that are referred with established conditions. So just to review and clarify that the Community Center Board is ultimately responsible for conducting these assessments. It is still a multidisciplinary team with the appropriate personnel in the area of the child's concern. Evaluators need to be appropriately qualified under the Early Intervention Colorado personnel standards, so that they don't need to meet the CDE licensure requirements, but they do need to meet the Early Intervention Colorado personnel standards, and conduct a complete multidisciplinary assessment, which would include both the hearing and vision screening. Okay, so moving on to eligibility determination. So the AU evaluation is really determining whether the child exhibits a significant delay, and then the Community Center Board is determining and documenting whether the child meets the Part C eligibility criteria based on the AU evaluation information. The Community Center Board is issuing prior written notice and procedural safeguards related to eligibility determination on behalf of the child and family. Okay, quickly, we're going to open it up for questions related to this area.
All guests have been unmuted.
Any questions related to this process? Okay.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the individualized family service plan process. And I'm going to unmute Laura as well here. So feel free to jump in, Laura.
Okay.
We just really want to highlight and reiterate that when we're thinking about the IFSP, we're really thinking about it as an overall process, not just the written document. And that the team includes the family, the service coordinator, and at least one member of the evaluation team. A knowledgeable, authorized representative may attend in place of the evaluation team member. An initial meeting is convened to develop the plan. However, we recognize multiple meetings may be needed to complete this initial plan. And when you're thinking about the initial plan considered complete, you want to think about all the required components within the side-by-side, so items 32 through 37, that all those required components are met. And so when we talk about the IFSP team and the process, we want to make sure that you're continually reflecting back with the family to ensure that it represents the family's perspective, and that, you know, we're really cognizant of this need to check back in with them throughout the process so that they're participating throughout. So when we say knowledgeable authorized representative, we're really meaning someone who is authorized by a member of the evaluation or assessment team to interpret the evaluation information. So that's a key component of that part. Okay, so for the initial IFSP meeting, CCBs and AUs have the flexibility to determine whether or not to hold the initial IFSP meeting in conjunction with the evaluation or convene two separate meetings. And we realize that throughout the state that is done differently. A member from the evaluation team directly involved in the evaluation and or assessment should participate in the IFSP meeting in person whenever possible. If that's not possible, you can attend via phone or supply a written report that conveys all of the information from the evaluation. So the initial IFSP meeting must be convened within 45 days from referral for an eligible child, and that's going to at a minimum, you have to have the required participants, measurable evaluation and assessment results that document all developmental levels that support and convey the eligibility determination of the child, the family assessment results, documentation of the methods and procedures used, signatures and roles of each multidisciplinary team member, signature and date of the CCB representative confirming the child's eligibility status, signature of the parent confirming their understanding of the child's eligibility status, and date of participation in the initial plan if the IFSP is not completed at the initial meeting. So that's a key component, is that you're getting signature confirming their understanding of the child's eligibility status and the date of participation in the plan development. Laura,
I'm going to take this opportunity just to respond also to Trish Hoffman's comment, which I think relates to IFSP, even though I think it was intended to be a response to the family assessment portion. I would just really encourage folks to consider, particularly those of you that have really embedded that family assessment process within your kind of whole evaluation process, to consider that that you may do those processes simultaneously. We're not suggesting that you have a less quality process because you're not doing it prior to the evaluation, but there may be ways to either further integrate the family assessment within the evaluation. We've actually seen some pretty successful situations where an RBI, for example, is kind of used as a primary method and tool for the child level evaluation as well as the family assessment. So we think there are ways to embed and integrate those for teams that really desire to have those processes coupled. And it does result in supportive IFSP goals, as Laura suggested earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. I think that what this really means is that we can develop a better process where we're getting richer information during one instance of connecting with the family rather than perhaps multiples as are happening now.
And
Lenita, did you want me to say something else?
No, I just was going to add to that, when we're thinking about gathering rich information from families that children are determined eligible, it is a more respectful, meaning process for them, because it can be, a lot of private information that families are sharing, and then when we turn around and the child is not found eligible, that can be a pretty intense process for them to go through. So this means that we're really gaining trust and developing relationships with families that are going to be in early intervention services. Okay, so looking at the required components of the initial IFSP meeting, this is what meets the criteria for what must be completed within the 45 days. So all of these pieces that we just highlighted are the required components for that piece. Okay, so now we're talking about the initial document, not the initial meeting. And this is the required content of that initial IFSP. So the information about the child and family, the service coordinator's name and contact information, outcomes based on the concerns and priorities of the family and written within the family's routines, brainstorming strategies that can immediately be implemented by the family when they leave the IFSP process and go home, so that they can work immediately on some strategies with their child. Determining what skills are required to implement strategies to achieve the outcome. Determine best service fit for implementation of the strategies, including other services, dates and duration of services, parent consent for each service, and for late referrals, transition from Part C services. So you don't have to complete this in one meeting. We want to reiterate that you have to complete the entire IFSP. You should not be leaving any pages out. Should leave with an IFSP that clearly states eligibility or ineligibility, and provide prior written notice. And once that document is signed, by the family. You would not be going back to the office and making substantive changes as we move forward. Okay, so for transition from early intervention for children potentially eligible for preschool special education, between 2 years, 3 months, and 2 years, 9 months, prior to presenting the AU notification opt-out policy, CCB providers are going to review current assessment information to determine if a child is potentially eligible, and that is a child that has not met all of his or her outcomes on the IFSP and is demonstrating a delay in any developmental domain based on the expertise of a member of the IFSP team. Okay, so for the AU notification, an opt-out, going to explain procedural safeguards, the AU notification opt-out policy to the family. If the family does not opt out, personally identifiable information is shared with the AU on the Special Education Administrative Unit notification form, at least 10 days after the date the opt-out was explained and not fewer than 90 days before the child's 3rd birthday. So when that notification form is sent by the CCB to the AU, it's treated as a referral to Part B special education. With parental consent, additional information, so the current IFSP assessment information is shared with the AU. That additional information, so that current IFSP, should be sent whenever possible in conjunction with the notification form, or as soon as possible when you get consent from the family. Okay, and this is just a visual for you to look at the components of the transition plan versus the conference. So the primary component for the transition plan is to assess and teach the skills needed by the child so they can be successful in the next environment. It must be developed as part of the IFSP meeting, must be completed between 2 years, 3 months, 2 years, 9 months. And the rules for required participants in an IFSP meeting apply. So present should be the child's parents, family members, surrogate parent, or family, either the child's parents, family, or surrogate parent, the service coordinator, early intervention providers, and others the family wishes to attend. So that might be their pediatrician, a family friend, etc. The conference cannot be held before 2 years, 3 months. Participants should include the parent, the service coordinator, a representative of the AU, and any others the parent requests to attend. And it may be combined with the meeting to develop the transition plan. If it is combined, it must be part of the IFSP meeting and must include required participants for both the IFSP meeting and the transition conference. Hopefully that's a review for folks. Okay, so again, this is just a review between 2 years, 3 months and 2 years, 9 months. We're going to provide prior written notice of the conference. The CCB plans the conference taking into account the AU's schedule, and they invite the AU representative to attend. The AU is responsible to attend the transition conference. However, the CCB must convene the transition conference whether or not the AU representative attends, and it may be held as part of the meeting. During the transition conference, the AU of residents shall share with the family Part B eligibility definitions, share timelines and process for Part B evaluation and eligibility determination, information about the IEP and program options for special education and related services. The AU should share this information with the family prior to the transition conference if the AU cannot attend the conference. CCBs document transition conference decisions and required participant signatures on the IFSP transition plan page.
Okay, so we're going to finish up with transition here. This slide we won't spend a lot of time on. It actually contains information that we shared under the referral section as well. So just a reminder that when late referrals, are received for children that are within 45 days of the child's third birthday, if the referral is received first at the CCB, then with the family's consent, the CCB would share that information directly to the AU for Part B services. If the AU receives the referral, they proceed with the process. They're not responsible for notifying the CCB. And then lastly, this is our last slide on transition. This relates to the requirements for the Part B evaluation that occur under the transition. The AU conducts the initial evaluation for Part B within 60 days of receiving parental consent in conformance with the Part B requirements. Things that should be considered in that process include early intervention assessments, the current IFSP, information from the parents that's shared with families' consent. All of that's used in the Part B evaluation and eligibility determination process. And at the parent's request, the early intervention representative may be invited to attend the IEP meeting. And for each child determined eligible for Part B services, a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment begins by age 3 or as soon as possible after IEP development following Part B regulations. So I know we are a little bit beyond time. I want to respond to Kim's question about an MOU template. We actually have a draft of an MOU template that our two agencies have been reviewing. We will continue to move that forward so that we could share that example with you. I think what we are cautious about with release of a template is that there would be MOUs across the state that virtually look identical that are modeled after a template. And what we would prefer is that they be individualized and customized to the agencies and your local policies and procedures. That being said, we know that it is helpful sometimes to see examples. And so we're working through that, and we'll continue that process.
Okay, we're going to unmute your lines and take some quick questions. We also want to reiterate that we can address individual community TA needs, and we'll probably be setting up some office hours so that you can call in. We could attend interagency meetings, observe your processes, and review your interagency agreement. So just let Heidi or myself know what your needs are beyond this call today.
All guests have been unmuted.
Any final questions before we wrap up today's call?
I wanted to respond to a comment made. Sorry, I don't know. I think it might have been Joan. But just to say, we're going to continue to have conversations about supporting folks in the field around this family assessment process. And I wanted to mention that Robin McWilliam is very clear that the RBI is best to occur after eligibility has been established. So we'll also look to him for some guidance and support around how to encourage teams to perhaps update their process in a way that feels smooth and supported. We know that there are teams across the country doing it after eligibility is established, and so we'll mine them for some information and resources to support you all.
And just to be clear, we're not saying that you're not allowed to conduct an RBI prior to the evaluation. We are just clarifying how it reads in the regulations, and when we're, again, thinking about process, capacity, and funding, we want you to be cognizant of that as well. And so we are not saying that you're not allowed to do that. We're just talking about what we have interpreted as part of the regulations and what we've reflected in the side-by-side. Any final questions?
Thank you for sticking with us. We know this has been a lengthy call. We hope it's been informative. We welcome and invite you to connect with either of us to request additional support or clarification or have conversations about this material.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.